Hey everybody, it's Pastor Vance, January 5th, 2022. Got to my Bible readings a little later today than I normally do. A couple reasons, just a couple things with family in the morning. Spent some time with my wife and we got home and I read them then. And I want to telling you that to encourage you. If you can get them in at any point of the day. Is it good to have a routine where you normally do it and you have some time to sit and really concentrate on them? Absolutely. But sometimes you get to them a little later, and sometimes having them in a different window and outside of your routine can be helpful. I'm sitting here in a parent pickup line doing this, and I have some time here. I've got, I had 10, 15 minutes. I can take some time and I could spend some time with the Lord. I'd read the passages already, but still the point is I've got this moment here. Let me make the most of this time that I have. Didn't get him in earlier, I can do it now. So that's just an encouragement to you. Don't get discouraged when that habit of maybe doing it in the morning doesn't follow through, or you get busy and something happens. That's okay. Do it later. If you miss it altogether, that's okay. God's not giving you gold stars for this. There's no extra jewels in your crown. It's just a way to encourage you and edify you every day. And so just want to encourage you no matter what to do it. Today, we read 4 different passages like we do every day. Matthew chapter 3, we read about the baptism of Jesus. I'm sorry, that's the next passage. We read about John the Baptist today. We read Acts chapter 3, Peter and John go to the temple, heal a lame man. And we read in Psalm 5, prayer of David, and then Genesis 12 to 14. And there was a lot of great things for me in today's passages, a lot of things God spoke to me. One of my favorite verses from Acts 3. It's kind of a literary play on words Peter uses. But anyways, what really stuck out to me is I'm reading this prayer. I read Psalm 5 before I read Genesis. And in this prayer, David is asking for guidance. He's asking God to show him what path to take. Saying, God, tell me which direction to go. And he has this trust that God is going to show him where to go. And that's, we just did this series on the promises of God. And guidance was one of the promises we saw in Scripture, that God promises to guide us. And then when I read Genesis, it was so fitting to read Abram in his journey, because at the beginning of chapter 12, Abram is challenged to go and leave his family behind and go to a new place. He has to trust this process that God is leading him in. God's guiding him. He's doing exactly with Abram what David was asking God to do. Now, David says, I'm going to ask for this. I'm going to have this expectation that you're going to guide me, and then I'm just going to sit and wait. I'm going to sit and wait for you to show me what to do. Abram doesn't have that luxury. God tells him to go before he tells him where to go. Abram doesn't have the luxury of knowing where his journey ends before he begins it. And that is so true in life. That is so true in our journey with God. God doesn't always tell us the destination before he begins to lead us on our journey. In fact, Abram couldn't have fathomed all that God was going to do and lead him through. He couldn't have just said, hey, I'm leading you here, because it was so much for Abram to go through. And so much more that God had to promise him. So one, you just see this amazing faith of Abram, that God shows him this direction and he just goes. But then Abram is traveling and God stops him in this place, and he builds an altar there and he worships God. And he does it because God tells him, this is the place where I'm going to give all this land to your descendants. And while that's another promise that God is giving Abram, it's another covenant that he's making with him. If I were Abram, I'd be a little upset. Here I am on this journey. I don't get to know where I'm going, but I get to find out where my descendants are going to live before I even get to find out where I'm going to live. Why don't you just give it to me now? Give it to me now. Let me have it now. And then I can live here now. And then I'll give it to my descendants later. But that wasn't the journey that God had for Abram. That's how we operate. We see what God has for us in the future and we want it now. We don't want to wait. We don't want what the journey's going to bring us. There's a lot more that Abram has to go through. If that's all that Abram did, his faith wouldn't have grown the way that it needed to. He wouldn't have developed the perseverance and the patience and all that he needed to endure what he was going to endure. The journey isn't always about the destination. The journey's about the journey. The journey's about what we get to go through the journey, what we get to experience through the journey. But then Abram has to go to Egypt, and they have some problems there. But they come back around to this same place. They come back to the altar, and Abram again worships God, giving him thanks for this promise. That one day this journey is going to end, that one day there is a destination, there is a point to this, there is something that God is doing, that something is God is work at. And Abram is faithful in trusting that God is going to do that instead of simply wanting the journey to be over and getting what he wants. He doesn't say, God, I trusted you. Now you can give it to me. There, I went through a trial. Now you give it to me. No, the journey wasn't over. Because God had so much more for Abram than that one spot. You know, sometimes we stop on our journey. Sometimes we don't want to go any further. And there's a lot of reasons why. Because we don't think we have the strength or the patience or the faith or whatever it is that we need in that moment to just take another step. But you got to keep taking another step. Sometimes what we gain in the journey is the point of the journey, not where we're going. You know, sometimes the perseverance that we develop isn't about helping us get through the next problem. It's just about the perseverance. And the patience that we develop isn't, you know, to help us somewhere in the future. It's so that we have patience. Sometimes I think things God gives us on the journey become more beneficial than where we end up. So stop worrying about where you're going to end up and start living where you are. Keep taking one step at a time every day, closer to where God has called you to be, closer to who God has called you to be. And let him lead you. Ask for it, expect it, but start taking the steps today. And the more steps you take, the further along you go, the more you'll see what God is doing in your life.